right. Well, welcome, folks, to Skeptarchy, the podcast about the intersection of skeptical analysis and anarchist theory. My name is Kevin, and with me is... Hey there. All right. So, we're running a little short on folks tonight, but that's okay, because we have... well, I found a rather interesting story that I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. It's been in the news a bit recently. So the Supreme Court recently released a decision in a case referred to as Nestle versus Doe. Essentially, there was a case where a number of people from the Ivory Coast had been trafficked into the country as children to essentially be slave labor to produce cocoa, right, by U.S. companies Neste and Cargill. These companies don't actually own the farms or operate the farms in the Ivory Coast, but they do buy cocoa from the farms located there and provide them with technical and financial resources. So they were suing the companies in the U.S. Despite being aliens, because apparently that's a thing you could do, which I did not know. So this case had been going through the courts for about 15 years. And was basically saying, you know, these companies are doing a slave labor, or at least supporting a slave labor, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that because it's fucking slave labor, child slave labor.
Because that seems obvious.
Yeah. So it was argued in front of the court back in December. At the time, it looks like various justices from kind of both sides of the I will say the American ideological spectrum, we're kind of skeptical of the company's arguments, with the conservative Samuel Alito saying many of your arguments lead to results that are pretty hard to take, to the company's attorney. The three liberal justices being Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and I forget the third one. Were pretty critical of it at one point. Sotomayor saying it boggles my mind, so that's fun. Mm-hmm. But it recently came out with the result as being 8-1 in favor of the companies. Which, if they were really that skeptical and concerned about the company's arguments, that doesn't seem to kind of, mesh.
Right.
So it's a very peculiar situation. One that in my mind simply backs up the argument that the governing bodies of the United States don't give two shits about actual people and human rights. They're just there to support companies doing whatever the fuck they're going to do, apparently regardless of their ideological swing. The only vote against the companies was Sotomayor. So, yeah. The justices said that the appeals court was actually wrong to let the group's lawsuit go forward. This is the group of citizens or Mali citizens who are claiming they were taken from their country as children and forced to work in farms in the Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, as it's locally known. So apparently, according to the decision, which was written by Clarence Thomas, he says, although respondents' injuries occurred entirely overseas, the Ninth Circuit held that respondents could sue in federal court because the defendant corporations allegedly made major operational decisions in the United States. The Ninth Circuit erred by allowing the suit to proceed, was what he said. So it sounds like they're using legal fuckery to basically say, this has nothing to do with the U.S., so we're not gonna deal with it. Which is just, it's the Supreme Court's way of saying, fuck it, we're not getting involved in this, so we're just going to, we're just gonna let this lawsuit drop because not our problem. So the argument from the group from Mali is that Cargill and Nestle aided and abetted their slavery as children by, among other things, buying cocoa beans from farms that use child labor. The group sued, seeking to bring a class action lawsuit on behalf of themselves and who they say are thousands of other former child slaves. The companies say they've taken steps to combat child slavery and denied any wrongdoing because of fucking course they did.
Right.
They're not gonna fucking admit that shit, please. And
who believes what they say?
Yeah, steps to combat child slavery sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me.
Yeah.
So
without specifics, it is bullshit.
Yes. So apparently the law used here is interesting because it was the very first law enacted by Congress, the Alien Tort Statute, which permits foreign citizens to sue in U.S. courts for human rights abuses, which is kind of exactly what this is.
Right.
The question for the justices in this case was apparently whether it permits lawsuits against American companies. So we have a whole other fun bit right here because, the whole Citizens United thing is commonly, said to give corporations personhood,
right.
Which, as I understand, is kind of a massively oversimplified way of understanding it. But, for all intents and purposes, that's kind of what it did.
Right.
So the question of whether or not a foreign citizen can sue a U.S. company like this, that doesn't seem like it should be, an issue. It's
right. Yeah.
Yeah. What the fuck?
According to this article from BBC that I am seeing, they say the court ruled 8-1 that the group had no standing because the abuse happened outside the U.S. But regardless of where the decisions are made, the physical active slavery that profited the U.S. company happened outside of the U.S. So there's no standing somehow. I don't know how you actually square that circle.
So apparently in 2018, they actually ruled that foreign businesses can't be sued under the law. In that case, it was the court rejecting an attempt by Israeli victims of attacks in the West Bank and Gaza to use the U.S. courts to sue the Jordan-based Arab Bank, which they say helped finance the attacks. Which is that is really fucking screwy there.
So they're saying in that case that because the company is not a U.S. company, then you can't sue them through the U.S. courts?
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have any standing or any ability to enforce anything, given that neither the plaintiffs nor the defendants would be a U.S. entity. But in the case of both Nestle and Cargill, these are both U.S. companies.
Right. Their head offices are in the U.S., so...
Yeah. So, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, I get the 2018 thing, a ruling that a foreign business cannot be sued under the law, because of course it can't. We don't have any jurisdiction over companies that are not based in the U.S. But in this case, this is just such utter bullshit.
So is this ultimately absolving Neste and Cargill in favor of the idea that these companies that work for Neste and Cargill are the ones that need to be sued? And since they're not U.S. based, then you can't do that?
Yeah, it's a little complicated to understand, but I believe that's kind of what it's more about the fact that I think they're siding in favor of them saying that because all you did was, do business with them, you can't be held liable for the shit they did, which in today's system of global capital is bullshit.
Yeah.
You absolutely can and should be able to hold companies accountable for knowingly working with companies that are engaging in fucking child slavery.
Yeah, I've got a quote here from Terry Collingsworth, Executive Director of the International Rights Advocates. He says, the companies, Neste and Cargill, decided on budgets. They decided on the planning and the business aspects. All those things were done from the US. So in that they did, like, if you can provide evidence that those things were done in the US, then it seems pretty obvious that they're responsible, right?
Yeah.
That's brutal.
That is absolutely ridiculous. So, okay, yeah. So essentially, the ruling is that, yeah, because none of this actually happened in the U.S. So I guess, like, when the law that they're trying to use to sue was originally created back in, the late 1700s, I'm guessing it was the idea that if you lived in the U.S. but weren't a citizen, which was a pretty common thing back in those days, then, you could sue, U.S. entities for human rights abuses. But the assumption, I guess, would have been that, they could only happen here because traveling was much harder back then, and, transoceanic commerce was not a huge thing at that point.
Right.
So, like, I kind of get where they're coming from if they go based on the original intent, but, like, this is one of the big things that the Supreme Court routinely fails to do, which is realize that the world has changed in the preceding 200 and almost 50 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, these laws still make sense, but you have to understand them in the context of the current world, not the context of when they were written.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, this is complete and utter nonsense. And it, like I said, it just proves to me that the governing bodies of the U.S., the courts, Congress, the executive, none of these actually give a shit about people. They only give a shit about companies and profit, which is, what we've been saying this whole time. And, like, they are constantly giving us demonstrations of this reality and then just covering it up with, a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo as if that makes it all right. Because apparently they haven't gotten the message that legal and moral are not the same fucking thing.
Well, no, yeah, they definitely don't know that. They think that if it's against the law, then it's immoral.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. If it's legal, then it's okay. Then it's ethically okay.
Although it does look like the plaintiffs are saying that they do plan to file an amended complaint, which he believes will satisfy the court standards. Okay. So this thing was essentially dismissed on a technicality for all intents and purposes, right? This was saying, you don't have the right, T's crossed and I's dotted for us to take this on and actually issue a substantive ruling. This is do better from a legal perspective, which is just, if that's the reason you are dismissing a case of this magnitude, you deserve the fucking guillotine that's coming. I swear to God.
I listened to the podcast 5 to 4 a lot, and they take Supreme Court decisions and break them down with like a kind of progressive perspective. And this is a thing that the Supreme Court of the United States does over and over and over again. They will shuffle off important cases under some technicality that they don't have standing, or they don't have this thing, or they don't have this other reasoning properly. And it's usually based on some outdated idea of the original Constitution. And like you say, like, they don't update their perspective. And the more conservative the court gets, the more federalist justices end up on there, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
Like you say,
yeah, this is just a bunch of frustrating bullshit from the court. And, like, the fact that the original arguments made it seem like many justices had problems with the company's defense, and then it comes out 8-1 in favor of the companies. That just feels wrong. It feels like some shit happened there, and I am quite frankly disturbed by it.
initially would have been like, they were like, oh, if we don't rule, the arguments you're making make it seem like you're pro-child slavery and like we can't do anything about that. And then in the ruling that they actually go down, they end up saying, oh, there's no standing. So we don't actually have to make an official ruling. We don't have to say that child slavery is bad or good. We just have to say that these people in particular had no standing in this case.
Yeah. I just discovered a rather disturbing line in the opinion, which was to plead facts sufficient to support a domestic application of the Alien Tort Statute, or ATS. The plaintiffs must allege more domestic conduct than general corporate activity common to most corporations. Basically, it's saying you have to do stuff that's more egregious than most U.S. corporations do. In an age when U.S. corporations are getting away on the regular with the most egregious shit you can think of, that is an impossible standard.
Yeah.
Like,
you'll never take them down for anything then.
Yeah, that standard makes no sense.
Yeah.
And it's just a way of saying, basically, we're not going to hold any company accountable for anything unless it's something that most other companies aren't doing. So basically, you have to be the worst of the worst before we even lift a goddamn finger.
You have to have slaves in the United States borders.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
So.
That's brutal. Yeah, that's really brutal.
Oh, God. So the company Cargill responded in a statement that their work to keep child labor out of the cocoa supply chain is unwavering, apparently. And they're saying, we do not tolerate the use of child labor in our operations or supply chains, and we are working every day to prevent it. We will continue to focus on the root causes, including poverty and lack of education access. And I'm like, no, honey, the root cause of child labor is using kids to do labor. Just right. Stop doing that.
Yeah, that's right. Stop paying people who do that for you. Yeah. If you know that somebody underneath you is doing that, don't give them money.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Stop working with them. Like, this isn't a difficult thing. Like, if you actually want to prevent child labor or child slavery, stop working with entities who do the child slavery. That it's really that simple. Just stop giving them money. Yeah,
that's right. A Neste spokesperson in a statement on the ruling said child labor is unacceptable. That's why we are working so hard to prevent it. Neste never engaged in the egregious child labor alleged in this suit, and we remain unwavering in our dedication to combating child labor in the cocoa industry. I don't even believe you.
Yeah, no. I love the end of that statement, which is, our ongoing work with partners in government, non-government organizations, and industry to tackle this complex global issue. Right. I agree it's a global issue. It's not that complex.
It is not as complex as they think it is.
No, it's not. The only reason y'all think it's complex is because your profit motives are tied up in that shit. That is the only complicating factor. And that is why you won't do shit about it, because you won't do anything that harms your profits.
Well, so that's right. Yeah.
If ending child labor would be harmful to your profits, then you ain't gonna do shit about that. That's why you call it complicated. Because it's really not. It's really, really not.
It's super easy to not have child slaves.
Right? Easiest thing in the goddamn world. Just don't do the slavery. Don't do the forcing kids to do work for you.
Yeah. Stop. If you know somebody has kidnapped children and is forcing them to work, change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just a giant goddamn clusterfuck, and I hate it so much.
I don't mean to be a doomer. I don't like being a doomer, but the United States often makes me think that it's just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's never going to get any better. It's just bad.
Yeah.
And the rest of the world follows the United States far too closely.
Indeed we do. I'm just exhausted.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Like, I don't know. It's like, on the my Saskatchewan podcast, we were talking about some racial justice things and some discussion about residential schools again, because more tribes are doing more searches for bodies at residential school locations.
Mm. Yeah,
And
I heard that they found like over 500 so far. That was the last number that I saw, I think.
In Saskatchewan alone, we found 566, and there are still 4,100 unaccounted for children, at least 4,100, up to 6,000 just in Saskatchewan. So that's not good.
Yeah, no, not.
But it starts to feel like exhausting. Like, and I'm an incredibly privileged person, so so for me to be exhausted, I can't imagine the weight that it must bear on people who have been impacted by this stuff. Like, it's exhausting for us to talk about Supreme Courts siding with child slavery, but imagine being a child slave, right?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And like, yeah, it's, actually being in that situation must be fucking torturous.
Yeah, like it's horror.
It's frustrating to know that this shit is happening and to not feel like you can do anything about it.
Well, yeah, and the Supreme Court, which is supposed to be a place where they protect your civil rights and your society, actually does the opposite regularly. Yeah. And in this case, sides with slavery. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's not much analysis in that except like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's like I'm kind of stuck for words just because there's so much that you want to see happen, but not being able to bring any of it about in any substantive way is just incredibly frustrating. And like, there's so much you can say, but talking, at the end of the day, it doesn't do a whole lot to actually address the problems in question.
Yeah, like, I was talking to somebody, and the idea of violently overthrowing the government seems impossible, but also like the only option.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do when the very institutions of power are the ones that uphold this injustice regularly, and regardless of what anybody says and regardless of the evidence?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know. I don't know what the solution possibly could ever be. Like, the world's just awful and it's just never going to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not to be doomer about a lot of this stuff, but also like being doomer is the last thing we really want to do, because like,
right.
As soon as we give up to this, then that's just letting it continue, and obviously we don't want to do that. It feels like we're kind of trapped in a lot of ways, because like, we know something needs to be done about this, but we don't know what can be done, what we could do to help. Yeah. And like, so, I know there are a lot of organizations out there doing work to actually help, and, contributing to those is definitely one way to try and make a difference.
Yeah. Like, if one were to say, like, even in the case of this particular Supreme Court ruling, going and it's the International Rights Advocates. Seems like that's if you can find a way to help them and support them.
Yeah, definitely.
Radicalize your friends.
Radicalize your friends. Yeah. I mean, the more people we actually have who are concerned about this stuff and looking for something to do, the more likely it seems that we might be to find something that we can do, even if it's small, even if it's just, maybe we can't do anything overseas, but maybe we can, at least find a way to help the people next door to us and, set up community groups and mutual aid networks. And, it's not a lot, and it's obviously not going to help the people, that U.S. companies or, companies from imperialist countries, we can't necessarily stop them right away, but perhaps, with some time and effort and, actually organizing to find ways to help one another, we can perhaps break their power over us. And, if they don't have power over us, then they might just, stop having the ability to do the shit that they do to everyone else.
Do we want to talk about physically attractive individuals earn substantially more?
Oh, God, yes. Okay, all right. So I ran across a study, actually 2 studies, both of which had some pretty fucking obvious outcomes. So the first one is a study which is entitled Physically Attractive Individuals Earn Substantially More Than Otherwise Similar Unattractive Individuals, with the beauty wage gap being the largest among black women. And I'm sitting here like, no fucking shit. Of course, right. That's going to be the case. Like, the prettier a person is, the more likely they are to get a higher salary in negotiations, because that's just how human bias works.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is far from okay, so please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that this is in any way okay. I'm just saying that is so incredibly obvious, and the fact that this study was published in 2021, as if we're just now figuring this out, is disgusting.
Yeah, and the fact that the wage gap is largest among black women, it makes it also fits the European beauty standards that have been forced upon people through media and marketing and all this for our entire lives too, right? Like,
yeah. So there's actually plenty of evidence to support that one. Specifically, I saw a study come out of analyzing the data from the dating website. Oh, God damn it! I can't remember the name now. OkCupid. God damn.
Okay, there you go.
So on OkCupid, when you are, when you're given a, you're shown a picture, and, you can usually, I don't know if it's still this way, but you used to be able to do like a 5-star rating, right? So you could choose 1 of 5 stars. And so they aggregated all of this data, both who was doing the ratings and who was receiving the ratings. And what they found is that black women, without exception, received the lowest ratings on average as compared to every other racial and gender group they studied. And it did not matter who was doing the rating. Like, the ones that were most likely to rate them the highest were black men, but otherwise, that, like, even then, like, black men tended to rate white women much higher than they rated black women.
Right.
So there's already, like, a pretty well-established evidence saying that, European beauty standards say, have been programmed into society such that black women are automatically considered the least attractive in terms of, racial and gender statistics, right? So we already know that black women are, considered the least attractive by those standards. So saying in this study that black women are the most affected by this by this wage gap situation makes a lot of sense, because what you're saying is that, the quote unquote prettier black women are making much more than the quote unquote ugly black women, or least attractive versus most attractive. So that gap is the widest. But I'm like, it feels like something that, obviously, I'm a big proponent of science. I'm a big proponent of studying anything and everything that we can. I am more surprised that it took this long to come to this conclusion than the fact that it was done at all. because I feel like this is something that would have been studied a decade or more ago. Like the fact that it's taken this long to find this out, in a scientific way, just blows my mind. Yeah. And so similarly, we have another study that also just came out very recently, which was that large landlords file evictions at two to three times the rate of small landlords, which is a disparity not driven by characteristics of the tenants that they rent to. So like they controlled for various tenant characteristics. For small landlords, organizational informality and personal relationships with tenants make eviction a morally fraught decision. Now, that is just fucking obvious. Like, yeah, of course, right. A big faceless corporation that doesn't directly work with the people is going to have less trouble saying, get the fuck out, than a one or two house owner landlord that actually, directly interacts with the tenants.
Yeah.
So again, this seems like it was so obvious. Like, of course, people who have, better relationships with their tenants are going to be more hesitant to kick them out. Like, again, this is one of those things that, why is it that we are only just now studying this in 2021? Why was this not something we started studying back in the fucking 80s? Oh, wait, right. The 80s were the Reagan era. I'm just like, how do we go this long not studying these incredibly basic social phenomena?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a good explanation because it's so absurd.
So for whatever reason, it's not actually loading the article that I would like it to, but...
Yeah. Troubles myself.
Yeah, it's fine. So, I feel like this is, again, these are fairly obvious conclusions for fairly common phenomena, and it's just so frustrating that we are this bad at doing research on, basic social phenomena to tell us this. Like, obviously big landlords doing lots of evictions is a bad thing. So maybe we should be, restricting their ability to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe making evictions a bit harder to do. Maybe requiring that they provide income, or they provide help in like locating income or rent assistance programs before they just kick them out on the street. Maybe we should make housing a human fucking right. Maybe we should make housing something that is not commodified for profit because everyone needs it.
We also know like that all of these societal problems that we associate with housing or with homelessness are solved as soon as you give people homes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's amazing how easy it is to fix problems that arise by people not having homes by giving people homes.
Yep, that's right. And
you wouldn't think that this would be a radical idea, but as soon as you bring shit like private property rights into it, suddenly it becomes a whole big thing that a lot of people don't want to help with because it fucks with their property.
Yeah, that's your private property concept right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like it costs society less money to give people free homes than it costs to have them living on the street. So,
yeah.
What the fuck is wrong with this?
Yeah.
Even if you don't care about people and only care about money.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't actually make any sense. But you still have people that refuse to even take that argument and like actually do something about it, because a distributed cost to society is valued far less than an individual cost to a landlord.
Right.
So, yeah, that's about as much angry ranting as I can do for one night. So, I think I'm about to wrap this episode up. I know it's a bit shorter than usual.
That's okay. Okay, so you can find
You can find me on Twitter at AncomPsychom or over on Twitch at Anarchist Laboratory, where I do even more of this angry ranting.
And I'm on Twitter at Skeptical Lefty. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/CJBrainstorm. And our website is skeptarchy.com. Our show Twitter is skeptarchypod. You can email us at skeptarchy@gmail.com. All right.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
You bet.
All right.